Welcome to Weird Web Radio, an explorer's guide to hidden worlds of the paranormal and occult, reality-expanding experiences, and the downright weird and bizarre. With your host, Lonnie Scott.
Hey gang, welcome to another episode of Weird Web Radio. I am your host, Lonnie Scott. In this episode, it is my honor and my privilege to introduce you to one of my absolute favorite people and a very dear friend of mine, Heath, also known just simply as Kat. Kat has got a great new book out, which I had the honor to review before it was published. You'll even see a little blurb that I put there, and it's on the back of the book. The title of the book is Elves, Witches, and Gods, Spinning Old Heathen Magic in the Modern Day. Fantastic book. Kat is also quite a prolific author, busy, creating excellent and good content on her blog. And you can find all of that at cohellrune.com. All these links will be in the show notes, of course. And under that title, a previous book, Essays from the Crossroads, which I also encourage everyone to go out and grab a copy of because it is very, very good. And in fact, other than 6 Ways by Aidan Walker, it is the book that I have given as a gift to other people the most often. Kat's bio, should you need one, straight from the back of the new book. Kat Heath is the founder of the Cult of the Spinning Goddess and co-founder of the Open Halls Project. She holds membership in the Shenandoah Valley-based Great Valley Kindred, as well as the Troth. Kat has led ritual and taught classes locally at in-person events, online, and is a co-presenter on the 2018 Land, Sea, Sky Travel, Hidden Folk, Witches, and Elves Tour of Iceland. You can visit her, like I said, at cohellrune.com. Kat teaches courses. She's got books. She's got a great blog. I'm not standing in the way of you getting to know Kat even more. We have a fantastic conversation, and I can't wait for you to hear it. Please, as always, stay weird out there, my friends, and enjoy the show.
And we're recording. Awesome. Kat Heath, welcome to Weird Web Radio. It is awesome to have you here.
Thank you very much, Lonnie. Good to be here as well.
Well, that's good to know. Full disclosure, folks, Kat and I are pretty good friends, so we may ramble a bit. I'll try to do my best to keep any inside jokes or anything like that from popping up.
Yeah.
So, Kat has decided that the world needs more of her writing, more of her books, and provided the world with all sorts of amazing content and courses. I, of course, highly recommend all of them. Run out and get the things. But before we get into any of that, you are doing something in the world of heathenry that I love and admire, because I myself am one of those people who have decided to try to break the mold of modern heathenry a little bit. You have tried to point out just how magical it can be. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's fair, but it's not. I think you're assigning way too much intention to my actions and what there actually is. It's like I feel like I don't really have a choice in doing this stuff. Really, it's kind of like this weird drive. So
let's get into that drive. Where does the drive to expose, I guess, the magic, or even educate people on the magic within heathenry come from? Why is it necessary? Because there are so few voices, I think, who do that.
Oh my God, I don't even know. It's like, like I literally wake up and it's like, I've got to write about this thing. And then my brain won't leave me alone until I write about it. And yeah, it's like I said, you're just assigning way too much intentionality to my actions. I just kind of like go where I'm like sort of thrown with my writing, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, I could easily say it's the elves and the gods and whatnot, but I mean, I don't know. You know, I just write the things about the things I'm passionate about. And I mean, ultimately though, I do want to see more people kind of taking what I do and playing with the material and then making their own discoveries and then kicking the can further down the road and, you know, coming back with stuff that I can experiment with. And, you know, then in 5 years' time, I fully expect to look at my work now and think, that's a lot of crap. You know, so I don't know, like, I just kind of want to see people getting out there doing things, and I don't know. Sorry, that's not a very good answer.
Nah, it's all right. You felt defensive. I'll give you a hug later.
No, I didn't feel defensive. I just felt like, wow, these people really think I planned this.
No, perfectly fine. So how does your own journey into becoming heathen begin?
Oh, now there is a story. So it all began when I was like 11 years old. I was, in the school that I was at the time. It was probably like fifth grade over here, but it's a different school system where I grew up, and we call it primary school. In our class, we had to do this section of a day called silent reading, and I picked up this book of Norse mythology, and I was like, "Ooh, this is kind of cool." So I started reading it. I went home that night, and I just started praying to Odin, Frigga, Balder. I can't tell you why. It was just this really instinctual thing. And but then all the other kids at school were like, "We're getting confirmed and we'll get to drink the wine." So then I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to do that too." So I went and got confirmed, realized the wine was shit. I lasted less than 4 months as a Christian.
Oh.
went back to doing what I was doing. And then we started to get these library books in the local library talking about things like heathenry and witchcraft. So 13-year-old me is like, hell yeah, witchcraft. Let's get on that. So I started doing witchcraft at like 13, just to be a stereotype, clearly. And then, in 1997-ish, I went to like junior college. You go there between 16 and 18. I went there. I got access to the internet for the first time. I read up about heathens and heathenry, and I was like, yep, that's definitely me. That's what I am, and a witch. So that's kind of how it got started. And along the way, I was spending a lot of time up on the moors and just kind of having these mad adventures in the middle of nowhere. So that's how I got started, really.
Fair enough. I like how you point out junior college, you get access to the internet. That shows your age a little bit. We're the same age, I think.
Yeah.
I got my first access.
Wild.
Yeah, I got my first access to the internet going to the local junior college, and I remember the website I used. It was called. I kind of miss it, to be honest. It was called Avatar Search, the occult search engine.
What?
Yeah.
What year was this? Lonnie?
It had to be around the same time, 94.
Oh, you were before me.
Somewhere
you were
in
before
there.
me.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is how backwards where I'm from is. Okay. I had to travel 45 minutes on a bus to get to junior college because they had internet in that town. We didn't even have it in our town till like 99. So like 97 was when I first got the internet. And for me, the first page I found, and it's still knocking around it there, is Barbarian's Heathen page. Go look at it. It'll make your eyes bleed.
You're going to have those terrible stories to threaten your children with. Like, my day.
One day I'll show you Geocities, kids.
Yeah, my day. We didn't even have the internet in my town.
Oh, we didn't. My kid asked me the other day, she's like, how did you like contact your friends? Like if you didn't have mobile phones? And I was like, well, we put our shoes on and we walked to the houses.
Smoke signals.
She just looks like it was the most incomprehensible thing ever. It's like, yes, Pod, we used to walk for miles a day, just normally. For her, everything's on the internet, and especially with the pandemic, everything is internet or get in the car. It's none of this like you've got to walk to school for 3 miles at like 8 o'clock in the morning, freezing, uphill both ways.
Yeah, that the internet not in your town is your version of uphill both ways.
Oh God, yeah. But it was also good to not have the internet during those early days. Because I think one of the problems with the internet is that a lot of people kind of go on there looking for answers, And then rather than kind of finding where they need to be and like having their own experiences and adventures, they're letting other people's ideas kind of frame them, and I guess it's kind of ironic that I'm saying this because I wrote a book that's probably going to frame people's ideas, and I blog about stuff, and I'm one of those people on the internet putting ideas out. But I do think it's important to kind of keep checking in with yourself and not thinking that the people on the internet or people in books have got all the answers. You've got to go out and sort of experience things for yourself and sort of keep your own counsel a bit there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Although, I mean, I remember when I was, 13, 14, 15, it was the small Walden Books in our local mall. And, there was Buckland's Big Blue Book of Witchcraft and
That's a polite way of putting it.
Yeah, and Necronomicon Avon edition and LeVay Satanic Bible and a whole bunch of Sylvia Brown stuff and and Crowley's tantric yoga something or other. I mean, it wasn't even like one of his better versions of something, but that's basically what I had locally. So the internet was a godsend.
Oh, it was a game changer, wasn't it?
It was.
It's like a double-edged blade, though, isn't it? Really, there's a lot of good that comes from it, but there's also, there's a lot of pitfalls too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I could go on for days about the troubles of coming up, not only growing up, in important stages of brain development, but encountering strangers online with weird names as you're trying to figure out what it means to be a witch or a heathen or a chaos magician or any of these things.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, the greatest thing I ever discovered early on was a web forum, the Yahoo groups, like the chaos magic groups, Z Cluster and Chaotum Matrix or whatever the hell they pronounce that. And I mean, it was places where at least people were sharing ideas. You didn't find any stupid notions of racism or ethnocentrism. Like there was none of those real closed-minded ideologies. In fact, I think it was probably the absolute polar opposite, and it's so open-minded to be ridiculous at some points.
Yeah. I mean, like I found like, one of those like random heathen groups on Yahoo back in the day, and like, oh, so was people arguing. So I was like, yeah, I'm just going to not bother with these people. I'm going to go back to trolling people in chat. And then I went and lived in a tent for a while, so I didn't have access to internet either there. So that was fun.
I had a point where, I mean, I came up mostly with chaos magic, but heathenry was always super important to me in some way because of runes. And I kept encountering other people online who are associated with heathenry and runes who would inevitably out themselves with racist notions. And I couldn't make myself be a part of any of that. And it wasn't until I found lhasablaze.com where, people who are very near and dear to me now, were writing about approaching heathenry, like we were kind of pointing at in the beginning, with this magical mindset that I wasn't finding anywhere else. So, for you were talking about finding witchcraft and heathenry and coming up with these two ideas in your head. I think ultimately you marry them together.
Oh yeah.
Did you find a lot of pushback when you would meet others? Like, what was your experience developing this blended style?
I think because I spent a lot of time just not bothering with the internet, I didn't really get a whole lot of pushback until maybe 2007 when, see, this is another thing as well. Coming from England and, the community of there is very different too. Back then, the pagans and heathens and Wiccans all hung out together because we were really that small of a group, and it was kind of like a stick together sort of thing. So it really wasn't a weird thing to be heathen and a witch at all. There's quite a few people like that. So it wasn't anything I was like, oh, this is a problem. But then, like, I joined As True Law in 2007. And it's like, holy hell, these people really don't like this kind of thing. So I was just like, you know what, whatever, I'm going to keep on doing what I do. I'll just not talk about it with these people, I'll just keep doing my thing and they can do their thing, and but yeah, I'm fine though with being in communities where people don't talk about the magical and they don't talk about UPG. I quite like having delineated lines between, okay, this is a focus here, this is not the focus, and that's fine. That to me is just the rules of the hall. So yeah, but ultimately I'm still just going to do what I'm driven to do. It's I don't really think I've got much of a choice in the matter, honestly.
I get it. I totally get it. Since I brought up runes, let's talk about runes for a minute.
Yeah, let's do that.
How do you feel every time someone says, hey, can you recommend me a book on runes?
I feel like saying, oh my God, fuck my life.
It feels pretty cornered, doesn't it?
It does, yeah, because I mean, back 20 years ago, oh God, 20 years ago now, it was kind of simple, wasn't it? You just kind of pick up a copy of Futhark and be like, all right, yeah, this is it. But, certain people have outed themselves as being on the right wing end of things. And, and plus also a lot of what they're doing isn't great, if we're being honest. So yeah, you can't. It's this weird situation, isn't it, where you're just like, I want to recommend someone something on runes. They clearly want the more modern practice, and not the historical information. Where do I go? What do I do? So, yeah, I think there's a real deficit of sources in that area right now, and it's sad. It really is sad, because regardless what you think of the more sort of modern practices associated with runes, people are doing them, people are getting results from them, people are still going to do them regardless of whether they're historically authentic or not. We need good resources for this. We need somewhere to direct new people where, they're not going to ultimately wind up in these potentially, I don't know, grim spaces. So yeah, it's a bit of a conundrum right now.
Yeah, and a popular warning that you'll hear a lot of times, and I'm not going to name names of any authors or anything like that, but you'll hear people say, well, be careful when you read that. There's good content, but you have to take it with a grain of salt. Super not helpful. Is it?
Right? Especially if the person's new. How do they know what to take with a grain of salt? Yeah. It's got to be hard for someone coming up, we've got all this information at our fingertips, but yet sometimes too much can be a problem as well, can't it?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, you can totally get paralyzed by having access to everything there is out there. And if you want to delve into the social media background of a lot of things, it gets even more complicated. Like who's connected to who doesn't like who. It's like walking into a high school cafeteria and trying to make friends.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, there's all of that, and it gets worse the more microcosmic the realm of things gets. Right?
Oh God,
it's just so much more highlighted. Now, talking about runes, you talk about runes in your new book. And you say you put forward this idea that the runes, that Odin, when he grabs the runes up, he's grabbing them up from hell, the realm of the dead. And I fell out of my seat when I read that and went, yes, oh fuck yes. All these years I've done it, it never quite occurred to me that way. So let's dive in. Why do you make such a statement, I guess?
It's really the sort of the 9 days and nights thing. When you see the number 9 in some of the sources, I mean, for example, at Ragnarok, let's try to do this right. Hopefully that's right. So when you see, like, the number 9 in relation to Ragnarok, it's because Thor is taking 9 paces and falling into hell. When I can't remember what he's called. This is my memory issues again. He in I think it's Hermod. Yeah, Hermod. It takes 9 nights for him to get to hell. There's this kind of like theme of 9 and the journey to the afterlife. Odin, he hangs on the tree, for 9 days and 9 nights. He looks down to see them. Another thing we get told about, the position of hell is that it's down. It's in the north and it's down. So to me, that kind of like seemed really indicative of it. And then there's like a whole bunch of UPG there too. So, and clearly we're talking like mythology here as opposed to historical fact. So, like you can kind of engage with material on different levels, can't you? The mythological, the historical. We're clearly talking here in terms of mythology. So my take on the mythology based on the number 9 and the sort of like, I looked down, I grasped the runes, and that from the tree I fell. When I was like sort of thinking about it, every time I think about it, it's like he's getting closer and closer and closer to that gateway to hell, and then he just kind of grabs them and then falls back just quickly before he himself is killed in the process, right before he gets through the hell gate. So it's like, yeah, it'd be a really good manga. I'm just saying.
Yeah, could be. Something else that comes to mind with that, and of course you cover, is talking about the prophecy of the seeress being the story of Odin raising the spirit of the seers from the dead to acquire true knowledge and wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
What is it about coming to the dead to acquire true knowledge and wisdom?
Ooh, that is I have no idea, in all honesty. But you see it again and again. It's always to the dead that you see Odin going to call up, like going for knowledge. But it's not just any dead. This is one thing you see again and again. Like if you see a Draugr in the sources, they're not particularly smart. They're no smarter than the person was in life. But it's usually when they're going to the dead, it's a dead Volva, it's a dead witch. Perhaps they can see more. Perhaps there is, I don't know, again, just spitballing, who knows? But, for whatever reason, even the gods go to the dead for knowledge. And I find that a very profound thought, especially when you have gods like, the old man who is known for his wisdom. He's known for, sort of like always being in search of wisdom and greater knowledge. And yet he goes for dead to get more. I think there's definitely something there that's worth turning over in your mind.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I sometimes think that's one of those areas where perhaps myth has captured more of a window into real practice, perhaps by, magic using people pre-conversion, of which we know very, very little.
Yeah, and it was all observer perspective as well. Somebody who doesn't practice, who is speaking from a point of view of someone who's just watching it happen. And then you've also got to think about, well, how much of this stuff was just taken for granted, and they didn't see the point of writing different things down. I don't know. There's I definitely think that the myths can provide us with models for magical practice. Clearly I write about it in my book over and over. But I think it's also important to draw a line between that and what we know historically. We are ultimately using this for inspiration and creating experiments to try and get deeper and further with our modern practices. So, that's a very different thing from historical analysis, and I don't think it does anyone any good to mix the two up.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. However, you do have you have no issue whatsoever, and neither do I, of comparing different cultures' mythologies to, I guess, figure out more of what may be missing in what we have.
Oh, especially when they also have better recorded magical practices. That's when the real gold comes out. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. So I guess in your search within comparative mythology, while you're trying to solve more heathen puzzles, I guess, um, what's something that has been one of your favorite discoveries that really sticks out?
Oh God. The thing that really got me looking at the Greek magical papyri as a source was, I mean, we've all heard about Odin and Mimir's head, right? This preserved head that he like gets information from. Again, going to the dead for information. Um, in the Greek magical papyri, you have operations for calming down divinatory heads. You know, that to me, like finding that was like, oh wow, that's actually that's that's not just in the Norse sources, this whole idea of a divinatory head. And then, you know, you find it kind of continued in the later grimoires, like in the Grimoire Varum. You find, I think it's an operation to the demon Morail, however that's pronounced. And it's kind of written confusingly. You know, it's not immediately obvious that it's probably talking about creating a divinatory head. But if you read Jake Stratton Kent's analysis of the whole thing, you know, he's very clear on like, I think this is a divinatory head. And so you kind of look at that, you look at the procedures, the preservation elements, and then you cycle it back to the Norse stuff. And the more you kind of do this, the more you find these little bits of pieces of like of parallel of practices that parallel. The more you find these, the more you can kind of like discern, I guess, like this shape to these things that I think is kind of retained across cultures. I mean, of course, I can't prove it without a shadow of a doubt, but it's just kind of like it feels like I'm poking at a very definite shape when I'm doing this stuff. Another example of this is going under the cloak. I became fascinated by the story of the law speaker who went under the cloak. You know, like in Iceland when they were deciding whether they were going to become Christian or not, things have become really, really fraught. The Christians had declared themselves out of law with the rest of society, which was a huge deal. And so, you know, Christians and heathens alike were like, hey, law speaker dude, we all trust you. Can you make the decision? So he's like, yeah, sure. He probably didn't say it like that. But he's like,
Sure.
yeah, bro,
Gotcha, bro.
yeah, bro. Just let me get my cloak and lie down in the middle of Thingvellir for a day or so. So that's what he did. He laid down on the ground. He put a cloak over himself, and he told people not to say his name. And then he popped up a day later, and he's like, okay, so this is what we're going to do. Now, that has always fascinated me, because I've always thought, well, what was he doing under the cloak? You know, he clearly wasn't just getting some peace and quiet, because the people at Thing then, especially from the bigger families, had like these stalls that they could hang out in. You know, you see the remains of them at Thingvellir today. Like, I think, whose stall was it? I don't remember whose stall it was that I saw. But anyway, you can see them. They would have like places to camp, places where he could just go and be like, yeah, screw you guys, I'm going to go get some peace and quiet. But he apparently just laid down on the ground. So that made me wonder what he was doing. And what it was about that whole thing that, you know, people respected the whole don't say my name. And then you find other examples of don't say my name in conjunction with magical practices. And then things like, you know, people going into dark rooms to conduct magical rituals in which they are either traveling, like setting a part of themselves out somewhere to find some information, or they're trying to figure out they're trying to see unseen information in the world around them. There's actually a really good book about this by Johan Neffel Adelsteinson. It's called Under the Cloak. And he talks about how there's all these different examples of people going to different places and then going under the cloak. So most of the time they're sitting, maybe they're on a seat on a dais, but this going under a cloak thing seems to have been a recognized magical act. And then I started to think, well, Jon also talks about parallel stuff in Irish sources. Like you have the whole thing with the Tavfish, I'm probably saying that wrong, or the bull dream, where they would, they'd kill a bull and then they'd fall asleep in its skin, covering them, and then they'd have a dream of an ex-king. So I started to look further afield, and that also brought me into ideas of what's inspiration, what could it have been for the Norse, what was it for the Irish, what was it for the Welsh at that period, are there parallels there? And I don't know, like, I think when you do that, it's kind of like pulling in little bits of sort of similarly shaped pieces for a jigsaw and just kind of smushing them all together to get something that works. So that's what I do. I find weirdly shaped pieces of jigsaw that hopefully fit, and then give me something that I can work with to then go and do experiments with, because that's my goal, really. I want to come up with a workable experiment that I can then evaluate after I've done it, and then rope other people into doing it, and then evaluate further. And then, hey, maybe I'll have a workable practice by the end of it. So, yeah, it's only really when you start sort of poking outside of Norse and, early English sources that you can really sort of do that with some practices. It's, I'm not claiming authenticity here, but hopefully I can eventually claim workable,
Hey, I think you've pulled that off pretty well. Now, talking about going under the cloak, you yourself have visited Iceland and conducted an under the cloak experiment there, have you not?
Yes, a couple of them. This is what happens when you help to facilitate a tour. You have people you can rope into things. So, that was it was really interesting, actually. We were in a place called Blondos because we went to this textiles museum, and a group of us after the tour went along the side of the sort of like an inlet, and we went under the cloak, and two of us saw the same thing when we came back up again. So 4 people, 2 see the same thing. That's not bad going, and especially when it's like a really specific thing as well. Like that was interesting. That was really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second time I went under the cloak was at the side of Godafoss, and that was just that was really cool. That was really cool. And the omens after that one just blew my socks off, really. I mean,
is it something you can share?
Yeah. The going under the cloak, it was kind of like this. We were playing with the idea of, do these stories actually, are they actually all real? Because you have the story about the lawgiver again. He Thorgeir, he went and threw his god posts in Godafoss after making his declaration at the thing. So we were kind of like, well, are those god posts still down there? Would they exist physically or like, broken down, or do they just exist as like kind of like layer of story down there? So it's like really kind of playing with the idea of story and reality. So I went and I was like, I think I was the only one who did this because everyone was like, oh my God, this waterfall is amazing. And it is amazing. So I went under a cloak at the side of Godafoss, probably in the background of quite a few tourist pictures doing this weird stuff. And, like I saw, well, I say saw, but like it's more like you're sensing. It's like kind of like feeling something on your fingers versus seeing something outside of yourself. I saw or I sensed kind of like the echoes of God posts. And, in like my kind of like, my visualization, I was pulling them out and kind of setting them at the side of Godafoss, kind of like, yeah, let's resurrect this. And I opened my eyes, I turned around to where I'd kind of plonked them, and where I'd plonked the Frey one in my visualization, I noticed that the way that the rocks were shaped was kind of like a pedestal anyway. I was like, all right, that's kind of cool. But, I probably remembered that. But then everything got really, really quiet, which is ridiculous at the side of one of these huge waterfalls. They're so noisy. But everything got really quiet, and all of a sudden I could hear these wing beats. And I looked, and I saw these two ravens, and I could hear the wing beats as they were flying, and they flew across from my side of Godafoss to the opposite side, curved up and flew by me. And as they were doing that, I became really aware of my breath. It was this, I felt very connected to the breath. I felt like I was a part of something much, much greater. And, in a way I was also like experiencing Odin at the same time in the wind as breath. And then the moment sort of broke. But then I was like, thanks. That's another clue right there. That's something else I can work with. So that was really special, because until you've had that happen, that sort of weightiness of moment, and everything in the world around you just boiled, like just sort of fade away, so that all you can hear is the things you are meant to hear over the noise, and then everything comes rushing in again afterwards. It's weighty. It's very weighty, and it's sacred. I need to stop now.
No, that was wonderful. Thank you for sharing more of the details of your experience. Sometimes these more personal, magical, and especially trance experiences are exactly what I just said, personal,
Mm-hmm.
and very, very relevant to you, but they may not always translate to others. And sometimes they're very profoundly life-changing. I know I've had such experiences.
There's a lot of stuff that I couldn't actually just fit in the book because of word counts and stuff. I think I was already over when I submitted it. So there's a lot of stuff that I wrote, but then I had to kind of like hold back. And I've been toying with the idea of posting them on my blog at some point. I don't know. It may make it out there. It may not.
Oh, I'm sure it will at some point. You're pretty good at sharing your thoughts. And one
That's
thing
a
that
really
has
nice way of calling me gobshite, Lonnie.
hey, count me grateful. I do make your work required reading for anyone that I teach. So there's that, right?
Oh, man.
No pressure.
Polluting the minds already. Great.
Right. You talked about the connection between Odin and the wind and breath, very briefly recounting that experience under the cloak in Iceland. You've written about this as well. So would you be willing to explore that a little bit further and how those things do all connect up?
Oh, yeah. This is part mythology, a whole bunch of UPG, and a chunk of praxis as well. So just fair warning before I go into it. This comes from the sort of like creation story that you find in Völuspá, the whole Ask and Embla thing. In that story, the three gods come across these logs, and they decide to enliven them. And the first gift, which is from Odin, I see it as like the first gift of life, is ond, or breath soul. So to me, it comes from him. He is a giver of that. And, what is a breath if not borrowed wind? None of us keep the breath in our bodies. It's something that comes in and goes out, comes in and goes out. It's a shifting thing. There's a whole sort of like cycle of life and death in a single breath when you think about it. Like you take an in-breath. We do that when we're born. We hold it in our lungs. We breathe out again. When we die, we breathe out. It's like this interesting parallel of life and death. And that's something that comes from the old man from my perspective. So I don't know. I find a lot of mysteries there. And then, like in the greater sense, tying that in with the wind, and how he's also associated with storms sometimes, and especially with the Wild Hunt. The Wild Hunt is always, we think about it as being this massive wind with these spirits on it. And then you kind of roll into Elder Hyde's work about how spirits travel on the winds. And, he's got an amazing paper called Spirits Through Respiratory Passages. And he talks about how in these save seances, before a seer was able to give information, they would yawn deeply. What are you doing when you're yawning? It's a deep breath, isn't it, really? You're taking in air. And then there's he talks about how, you've got this concept of the breath soul, and, whenever you have magical attacks, there's a wind that blows up, whenever there's the idea that, the magician has sent part themselves, a wind that blows up. And this is something you find in the Welsh stuff as well. If you read the stories of Taliesin, he, when he is doing his thing, because a poet in Welsh sources of that period was a magical figure. They were deeply inspired. They got their knowledge from Anofn, they got the Awen, the inspiration from Anofn, which was originally the realm of the dead. So we got that tie-in with, hell again. And whenever, a poet is sort of speaking truth or giving prophecy, or, sort of slamming down rivals with their magical words, a wind blows up. There's this connection with wind and soul and magic, and it's and that was a long ramble.
Nah, no, you're not rambling at all.
I feel like I am.
Man, that's because you're in the hot seat.
Oy.
So, when you talk about your work in comparative mythology and things you experiment with magic, what you are looking for is exactly that: experiments, and something that you have practice that you can test out and give it to others and see how it works for them as well.
Absolutely.
So, along this path of Odin, the breath, the wind, how does that turn into something more practical that we can play with and test out?
For me at the moment, the wind and the breath thing is mostly just sort of trying to find ways of connecting with this with wider reality, in a sense. This, I guess it's I don't know, this kind of sense of interconnectedness with everything that's alive, everything that breathes. It's the one thing that we share together. And this is more of a meditative thing, which I know is sketchy in heathenry anyway. But I like meditating. I do a lot of meditating. I think it's important to, if you're a magic user, to meditate. There's so much benefit from meditation that if you're not doing it and you're working magic, then I think A, you're missing out, and B, you're potentially down the line leaving yourself at a massive disadvantage. But moving back to the wind thing, for me, when I had the experience outside of Godafoss with the wind and sensing Odin, for me then it became I need to experiment with this to try and get back to that place again. I want to be able to get back into that sort of state, that weighty, omened zone. Because I feel like if I can get there again, then what can I do? So that's kind of a direction I'm going with that right now.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And it kind of ties in as well with what I've been looking at with regards to charms. You find a lot of use of breath in the Old English charms. There's also a tie-in with fury and, being, well, Odin as a god of the furious one. That's literally what his name means. But he's also the father of charms. When you see him in Old English and continental Germanic sources, he's involved in healing charms. So, yeah, there's a lot of kind of nebulous thoughts I have around the whole thing, and I'm trying to bubble up some experiments to do out of it. But then, of course, like, we're in pandemic land, and finding the space and the opportunities to go off to some high place in the middle of nowhere and do crazy things, possibly raging myself into insanity, it's not that easy. So,
Well,
yeah, some of these experiments are big stuff. A lot of these experiments are just kind of like little stuff, and often just turn into like maintenance practices, or just things that I'm playing with myself personally. So
now the old man has obviously made himself very prevalent in our conversation, inadvertently even.
yep. He
On
has
our
a
part.
habit of doing that.
Imagine that when we're talking to each other. A much more, I shouldn't say more, but a very prevalent figure in your new book is the spinning goddess.
Oh, yes.
And I think the way this is presented is something new, at least the way to look at a divine figure in heathenry. You've brought more light to something I think may have been missed along the way somewhere.
I think that's debatable. Like, I think
Yeah.
a lot of people would debate my conclusions on it, and that's fine,
Mm-hmm.
But for myself, having experienced her, and very much in a way that I feel like she could have very easily taken my life had things gone wrong. That's not something I'm ever going to back away from. When she gets in people's lives, she's a lot scarier than the old man. She is a lot more serious, from what I've found. And she's also a lot more mysterious and in some ways hidden still. But it's not necessarily like she's mad about being hidden either. There's kind of like this sense of excelling at the edges, of like being very much a niche figure. So
Yeah, it's very compelling. I like the way that you bring the mythology together, and you systematically go step by step through history, saying, this goddess and this goddess clearly have these things in common, and this is why I'm coming to these conclusions. And I think you've made a very solid argument for this spinning goddess type.
I hope so. I really do hope so, because like you said, it is something that people don't like, that has potentially been missed, that people don't really think of. And I think there are reasons for that. Like when people think about spinning, we don't really think about anything exciting like magic. we tend to think about, people making yarn. But, spinning was a very, very it was a very, very weighty activity back in the day. It was important from a perspective of people having clothes to keep themselves warm, but it was also something that every woman could do, and that's part of, I think, part of the fear level involved in Scythe, or at least that form of Scythe, because if these people could, like, if this woman could just use a spindle and completely fuck you up, that's kind of like ninja, isn't it? It's very ninja magic. But yeah, and it also like ties in birth and death when you start looking at the wider, Indo-European ideas of fate. And I'm not talking about the Norns here, because, as I argue in my book, the Norns don't actually spin. And I know that's like a lot of people gasping, but they don't actually spin. They're never depicted as spinning. Although in there is one source in which they are plying threads together, and I will argue, like, Karen Beck Pedersen seems to consider plying a different activity to spinning, but I would argue, as a spinner, that plying is just more spinning. You are literally spinning more threads of spun yarn together, so it's still spinning. But for the most part, you never see them spinning orlog. at the base of like at the well. You don't see that. You know, they are shown like scoring onto slips and speaking Orlog. So that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But outside of that, you do find this idea of spun fate. You find this idea of when people die, you know, they are kind of ensnared by a snare or a cord or a halter, which, you know, what is a cord or a halter? It's the end product of something that's spun, isn't it? You know, rope is essentially spun. So, you know, it's like this end product, just like the end of a life, you have this end product of something that is spun. It is used to drag the dead person down. And then we get into the etymology of the word scythe, which is snare, cord, halter. And things get really interesting there, doesn't it? Don't they? Oh, my word.
Yes. Yeah,
Go,
all
go,
those
gadget,
things.
grammar.
Go, gadget, grammar. I like that.
Yeah.
All right. And we, in fairness to the people who volunteered to ask questions on the Facebook, I think we're going to put you in that hot seat now.
Okay.
Are you ready? You've had a
I'm
preview
ready.
of these. You've got a chance to prepare.
I have.
Drew asks, or what's he say here? Just finished a section on cosmology and can't help but wonder where outer space would fit in. Would it and other planets be part of Midgard, or would that part of the night sky that is Ymir's skull? That's interesting. I've never quite put that spin on it. He's got quite a long thing going on here, further talking about our current understanding of astronomy and modern heathens' worldview and so on. But I think you get the gist of what he's digging at there, right?
Yeah. I'm going to say two things here to Drew. The first is that, you know, mythological doesn't have to be the same as, you know, physical. You know, two truths are allowed to exist. Like when you're dealing with myth and science, this obsession with having the two be the same thing that you find Christians doing, we don't need to do that, you know. And then the second thing I'm going to say is, where is the most useful for you, Drew? Like, in your own work, which is the most useful way of including them? I mean, we could kind of go into like, okay, did the people who came up with this snorri, this like kind of like snorri derived, it's not all snorri derived, but like this kind of like view of cosmology, which, you know, Matthias Nordvig has pointed out the problems with that one before, you know, from a purely historical perspective. But, you know, what did they understand planets to be, if anything? You know, what did they understand the stars to be? We could go down that route, you know, because if they thought they were just like fires in the sky, then perhaps they would have been fires in the sky just kind of in Ymir's skull. But if they understood them to be like these external things, which is possible, there was a lot of like, you know, Neoplatonic and sort of like classical influence in Northern Europe at the point when this stuff was written. You know, where did they exist? Were the other worlds what they thought the planets to be? We just don't know. So what I'm going to say here is just like, go with what you think is the most useful. You know, if you can make it work, you know, one way, just play around with it. Just do some experiments, Drew, damn it.
I know Drew. I'm pretty sure Drew does a lot of experiments.
I know Drew too, which is why I'm saying that to him.
Yeah, I kind of look at it like everything in the physical realm, I guess, is physical realm for me. So I don't care how far into space you go. It's all kind of, if Midgard is that middle realm, then it's still part of that middle realm in my mind. And that's how I would see it. Until you get to the galaxy that is still forming, that is chemically made up of the same thing as beer. I heard about that one. That's something different. But
I mean, like I've always thought beer was amazing, but like, it's literally star stuff, man.
Yes. And then
Galaxy's beer, we're beer, it's all beer.
Yeah, it's all beer. Hail beer. And then some person named Morgan Daimler. I don't know if you've ever.
I have
heard
no
of this
idea
person.
who the hell that is. No,
It's some strange person that got in the group. says, I'd love to hear Kat's thoughts on the risks and rewards of including elves in modern practice. I mean, no small thing there, right?
Oh my God. That was well asked there, Morgan.
Yeah.
I know
whoever
what
you
they're
are.
doing. I know what they're trying to do there. So the risks of including elves in modern practice. If you read the Old English sources, the elves can make you really, really sick. They can seriously fuck you up. There's an entire category of diseases known as elf diseases because they're all just connected with elves. So, elves can make you sick. They can make you crazy. There's some sort of suggestion that, the symptoms of being ilfig, which is like Alaric Hall translates it as being engaged with an elf, the symptoms of being ilfig or potentially possessed by elves, getting visions, are not that dissimilar to an epileptic seizure. There's some confusion in these sources as to whether they're talking about epileptic seizures or some kind of, visionary experience involving elves. So, they can really screw you up. And when you look at sickness in, the early English texts, there's not a whole lot of sort of disambiguation between, sickness and curses. If you look at some of these sort of cures in them, which often involve rubbing yourself with henbane, which is so much fun, but don't do it too often. That you find these cures being put forward for a whole bunch, a whole laundry list of potential causes. So if you are being victimized by Elfseden, which is Elfseid, basically, or elves, or night goers, or Maren, or any number of things do this one thing, which tells us that the effects of illness, potentially tells us that the effects of illness, these illnesses, were not so dissimilar from the effects of curses. This idea that, the effects are very similar is something you find in Irish tradition as well. In fact, Morgan Daimler has written a paper all about that very thing. Well, not about that, but about the different kinds of magical practitioners in Irish tradition. And they make the point that, you need to be an absolute specialist to be able to discern between the causes there. But often people will just we're just gonna do this treatment that's like a catch-all thing because it's all the same sort of effects. So elves can really, really, really screw you up if you get things wrong. Now you're probably wondering why crazy people like me get involved with elves then. And there are a number of reasons. The first is that I really like them. I find them to be very likable beings to work with. I think they have an absolutely, there's a sense of humor there with them. You'll have things happen around them that just make you laugh your ass off. An example from last year, I was getting ready to do, I was sort of preparing a ritual to the elves because ever since Iceland, I've been doing elf rituals in accordance with the different sort of Pleiades, different sort of movements of the Pleiades. Long story, I accidentally crashed a hidden folk party on some geothermal moor with Morgan, and the Pleiades were doing the thing, and we're like, hey, let's try this out. So, I was trying to figure out, okay, what can I offer them? We did an online shop. It arrived. And organic apple cinnamon oatmeal, organic butter, and organic cane sugar showed up. We didn't order that. We didn't pay for it either. And it's like, I guess you want me to offer this to you? All right. So that's kind of become a regular offering now. But it just made me laugh when it happened because I'd literally said to my husband, I don't know what to offer to him this time. And then we're unpacking the the grocery, and it's right there. Or my author copies of my book, the other day, I think you may have seen my post on Facebook about it. The other day, I'm wearing this green shirt and, I'm kind of joking around because, like, I'm dressed like a wood elf. I come downstairs. Josh, my husband, is like clearing out some closet, and there's these. I'm not joking. There are these pointy elf boots just sitting there at the bottom of the stairs as I come downstairs. So I put them on, and I take a picture, and I post it on Facebook. I'm like, haha, look at this. And then, an hour later, Josh just gets a feeling to go outside the door, and my book is outside. This box full of books is right there. And my book is called Elves, Witches, and Gods. It's like, I see how y'all are playing today. Another reason why I work with them is because when you ask them for anything, when you ask them for help, it comes fast. They work a lot faster than the gods in my experience. So, good example. I had a package go missing before Yule. And, it's like everything was busy. The USPS has been jacked up for, since last summer. And it was just like showing, in transit, not even a location. It was like that for a month. So I went to the part of the shrine that we keep for the elves. We have like a house for them. And I was like, if you guys please help me and make my package arrive, I'll give you these things. 2 days later, my package arrived. It went from just being lost to, oh, it's here. There's that's something else that Morgan has found too with the elves and the postal service. If you want to get your stuff, make offerings to elves. On the way back from Iceland, this is another example. I was in New Jersey, and I was trying to get my connecting flight back to Baltimore. So, I'm exhausted. I've hauled ass from Northern Iceland. I stink. I just want to be home at this point. And I'm sitting on this plane, and we keep getting grounded because there's a storm system. And the captain's like, look, I'm sorry, we don't know when we're going to get clearance. And I am just done at this point. So I start praying in my head to the Alpha. I'm like, look, please, get me home soon and get me home safe. And there's this mad storm raging above us. Suddenly, the captain's voice comes on over the PA system, and he's like, we've just got clearance to take off. He sounds confused. It's like we've just got clearance to take off, and I'm thinking, hell yes. So then we go off, we take off, and we're literally flying through the lightning. We all made it safe, clearly, but it was as fast as that. It was as quick as that. Within less than 5 minutes, we were in the air. It was something else. So, yeah. I adore working with the elves. So,
I think that's your next book, Elven Postal Service.
The Elven Postal Service?
From their point of view, a whole department within the realm of the Alfar and where they live that handle accepting offerings and wishes and so on, and how they mitigate all of that and decide whether or not to deliver them. And
that'd be a really cool children's book, wouldn't it?
It would, wouldn't it?
I mean, my next book that I'm working on, that I'm going to get stuck into next month, is actually about story and working with spirits in stories. And the elves feature there a lot too, because I've been writing this fantasy book in a post-human world that's set in this post-human world for a while now. And it's got to a point where the beings I'm writing are sending me messages via third parties of stuff that they want. So just stuff about what kind of language I can use when talking about them, and what happened next. And it's been quite interesting, and some of it is, I'm pretty sure some of it is just channeled at this point, but it's got a huge elf vibe to it. And So they're also going to be featuring in the next book too. So it's just going to be elves everywhere, guys. Just
I like it.
elves. Me too.
Now,
More elves.
I do have to point out, because it's Morgan's fault. It's
always
always
Morgan's fault.
Morgan's fault.
Always.
That while you're talking about the risks of elves, one of us went offline. And now, the nature of Zencaster, which is the site and the program that I use to record the show, if anybody out there is unaware, it's pretty awesome. I highly recommend it. Everything should be in there anyway, because like it's still recording from your mic to your browser. But I just, as soon as it did that, I saw the offline thing go, and I went, shit, Morgan.
Well, it's either Morgan or the elves.
Yeah, well, when I had Morgan on the show,
Morgan's like a walking glitch.
Technological disasters struck again and again and again. So
yeah, that's on brand for Morgan.
We'll stop picking on that Morgan character.
No.
That is. So
I'm Morgan's official stalker, I'll have you know.
Yeah, well, I'm a big fan. It still floors me to this day. Maybe Morgan is getting more of the recognition and credit that they deserve, but like people talk about Crowley, like you have to learn Crowley or some shit, like especially if you're involved in any kind of Western occultism, especially in hermetics and so on.
Yeah,
like at this point in life, if you're involved in paganism or magic or folklore at all, and you are not steeped in the work that Morgan tirelessly provides this world, you are a damn fool, and I stick by that statement.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree with you, Lonnie.
Yeah.
Morgan's an absolute treasure. What they have put out and the value of what they do is, I can't even find the right words for it. They are probably one of the most important people in the sort of like modern pagan revival out there. And it's absolutely wonderful seeing them get more recognition now. And I hope that translates to book sales for them, and that, they continue to go up, 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 because the world needs more Morgan.
The world needs more Morgan. Put that on a t-shirt, folks. All right, couple more questions before we get out of the usual portion of all this madness. So everywhere, anywhere in the world, everywhere has its own folklore, its own legends, its own cool kind of things in history, right?
Yeah.
And I like to ask, like, anywhere that you've lived and you've been around the world.
This is my 7th country.
Yeah. Just think of one, if you can. I know it's hard. Place that has relevant folklore, like a piece of folklore that really resonated with you, or a historical figure, or something about the place that really, really made, like you really, really loved about it.
Iceland. Just
the whole damn thing.
Just hands down. It's so, like, the spirits there are so present, and the land is so wild, and I don't know, I just felt like it makes my soul sing. It's just, absolutely incredible. And it felt weirdly familiar too, and it's not just because I've been reading, Norse stuff, like Norse mythology and whatnot for years now. I wasn't sure what I was going to find when I got there, but just on the plane coming into Iceland, at one point I looked out the window, and it was just like this beautiful golden glow, because we were flying towards the sunrise, which is always magical. And then I saw this horse running through the clouds, and I'm thinking, nah, I'm just sleep deprived. That this is just like, nah. So I slapped my head a few times, which I'm sure the people sitting next to me must have thought I was nuts. But it was still there, and it was still running. And I'm thinking, well, that's cool. And as we get closer and we start to see like the sea around, the land, like I I saw what appeared to be a body, just kind of like, and I'm thinking, well, not like a dead body, like it was swimming. And I'm thinking, like, God, that's got to be way too cold. And I don't see any islands or boats anywhere. And then all of a sudden, they just dived under the sea. And I'm like, all right, okay, that's what it is then. And then it was just like that for the whole time. Like everything's just so present there, and it's wonderful. And it just, it's like this constant conversation with the unseen elements of the land, and being the absolute crazy person. No, the absolute, I don't know what to say here for this. I have a drive to experience this stuff, Lonnie. So that's the most polite way I can put it. So just like having that drive to kind of like, be in that sort of like conversation with the land and the beings, the whole thing was just, it was amazing. I didn't actually want to leave. And if I won a lot of money tomorrow, I'd probably be trying to move up to Akureyri. Honestly, like, bye. I'm off to go live on a fjord.
Yeah, I can absolutely see the reason for the enchanting qualities of Iceland. You don't even have to be a heathen or know a thing about Norse mythology. The place just looks. If ever there were a place on Earth that you think the gods went extra on, there it shall be.
You don't really even feel like, when I was there, I didn't feel the gods so much. But the elves, we went to this elf church at one point, and it was so cool. Like we were trying to head up north. We were trying to beat this snowstorm that was blowing in, because we just kind of like hit it right at the end of fall, coming into winter there, and like we were heading up north trying to beat this snowstorm. And it was freezing. It was cold, especially when you've been living in Maryland for a while. And, Maryland was still nice late summer, early fall temperatures. You go to Iceland at that time of year and it's cold. But when I was stood in front of the elf church, it was warm. I felt warm as hell, and it was comfortable. And, like I kind of wanted to go in there because it was just really comfy. But yeah, you the beings there, for me, they really they are the story with Iceland. Like going in Gorilla's cave, like a Dimmu that was just, that was so, Morgan didn't get on with that place, but I did. It was, I guess I like trolls. I don't know. But, or maybe they liked me too much and I was just getting lured in. Anything can happen. But yeah, they are the story in Iceland. The spirits of the land, the unseen beings, the gods. You don't really feel them nearly as much as anything else. So, which was a hell of a surprise. But I'm not upset.
Yeah, that would be a surprise. So I think we've come a good point for the regular portion of the show. Is there something that I should have asked or something you'd like to talk about that I didn't cover, or do you have any parting thoughts that you'd like to share?
I've got a parting thought. Just get out there and try things out, guys. Just give it a go.
Well, the book is titled Elves, Witches, and Gods. Get out there and get that book. Where else can people find you and all the things you do?
I am on siohelrina.com. That's really kind of like, it's my blog. It's where I sort of dump my musings. It's not necessarily lore based, although there are some posts that are pretty heavily cited. But there's a lot of kind of like more, I guess you'd call them philosophical musings. And that's spelled SEOHELRUNE.com. I also have a book under the name Sir Helruna called Essays from the Crossroads. And that's, again, it's more kind of like what you find on the blog. I teach classes. I have taught for Land, Sea, Sky Travel. And I am running a class on Elves next month as well. I think that's on the 3rd of April. That's the day before, I don't know what day it is. I think it's on the 3rd of April. I'm teaching a class on Elves. It's going to be bawdy, probably. It's already very punny. And I think I'm doing a presentation on Idun for the local trove thing, but it's going to be opened up further for people. I don't know. But yeah, that's where you can find me. Should you wish to. That's it. And we have a periodic podcast called Cafe Obscura, but it's kind of been in a lull recently because we've had some personal issues behind the scenes take over. But we're going to be getting back on things, and we're going to be diving into like these missing cases, the weird missing cases you find in national parks and stuff.
That stuff is so weird.
It really is.
So weird.
The thing with Cafe Obscura, the reason why we kind of set it up was to take paranormal things and then sort of trace the sort of like occult stuff in there, and then sort of talk about the occult stuff. So, for example, we did an episode on, those kind of creepy party games like Bloody Mary and whatnot. We covered 3 of those, and then we talked about some of the necromantic tech, like necromantic magical tech that you actually find in these games. So that's a kind of vibe that we have. It's a shit show.
Fun for the whole family.
Maybe not. Unless your family likes to necromance together, but
That's right. Now, talking about the weird shit, we are going to head in that direction. For everyone listening, as always, thank you so much for listening to the show. Please share with your friends and your family. And remember, if you want to hear the rest of this conversation, you're going to have to go to patreon.com/weirdwebradio or to weirdwebradio.com and click join the membership to get in. And with that, you'll gain access to the entire archives of all of that bonus audio. Once again, Kat, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to be here. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Stay weird out there, my friends. And it is bonus audio time. Kat, are you ready?
I was born ready, Lonnie.
There it is. What I say before we started recording, that's Danelaw dirt under these nails.
Yeah, Danelaw.
Nordic Mythology Podcast with Matthias Nordvig and Daniel Ferran just recently had somebody on talking about Danelaw. Highly recommend it. So good.
I haven't had a chance to listen to the new episode yet, so yeah, I'll have to check that out.
Lame. Okay, so
don't you judge me, Lonnie.
The first question around here is always the same. What famous person's resting place do you most want to visit?
Oh, God.
Do you want to hear how they just answered that question? What famous person's resting place would you most like to visit? That and many others, including what they think about the afterlife, what they may or may not do in cemeteries, what are their traditions, magical practices that have to do with the dead, folklore that surrounds their homes, and so much more, available for only $5. $5 a month. Even if I make more than one episode in a month, it's still just $5 a month at patreon.com/weirdwebradio or go to weirdwebradio.com and click join the membership. You can find me on Instagram at weirdwebradio. You can find me on Facebook as Weird Web Radio, or come join the new, fun and exciting Weird Web Radio Facebook group. Thank you again for being here. Stay weird out there, my friends.